Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from the Singapore FinTech Festival, and joining me for this segment, we have Oi-Yee Choo. She's the CEO of Climate Impact X. We're here to discuss why market infrastructure is critical for carbon markets. Oi-Yee, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, you got it. And how can carbon markets address the challenge of pricing opacity and liquidity to ensure a more stable and reliable trading environment?
Well, the transparency and liquidity of carbon markets is extremely important, right? Because, as we go into COP29, the idea is that globally we need to address a big challenge. And governments need clarity, corporates need clarity, and I think all of us want our leaders and governments and financial institutions and corporates to be really driving the agenda. And when you think about carbon markets, it really is the financialization of impact. And at the end of the day, if we cannot set a price to it, we don't understand the depth of the issue or the breadth of the issue.
Right.
And so in doing that, carbon credits sort of put $1 to it. Whether you love it or you don't love it, it puts $1 to the problem. And in order to put that dollar to the problem, the number needs to be a robust, financially transparent, a liquid amount, so that we know it's a true and fair valuation, right, in that sense. So carbon markets need to get there. I think it's a little bit way off. I mean, there are a number of obviously existential issues around carbon credits and how that's going to be addressed. But in order to push that agenda, in order to financialize it, in order to allow banks to be trading it, I think we need a much deeper and much more transparent system to work. You see that work very well in Europe and Australia and some parts of the US, and I think we think about that as, okay, that's a good way to capture who are the emitters, who needs to be funded to really drive change, climate change, and impact around that.
With the global race towards net zero by 2050, what do you see as the biggest barriers to widespread adoption of carbon markets?
Well, first of all, I think we need harmonization, and we need the regularization of sustainability and impact. And I think that's starting to happen, but it's been incremental, right? I mean, first of all, companies need to report, and right now, in Singapore, we're putting in standards for reporting Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, so it's sort of the acknowledgement of what we are emitting, and then therefore, what are we then doing to mitigate those emissions? And it can come from many, many ways. It can come from buying renewable energy. It can be ways like, for example, funding projects in emerging economies that support that, right? So that's what carbon credits are really for. But it's taking a while, and I think governments need to sort of come together and agree on the implementation of Article 6 and 6.4. I think those will be very critical issues to be discussed at COP next week.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And how do you see the carbon markets evolving in light of the increased scrutiny around it?
I think that a platform, doesn't matter how it looks like, that gives transparency to the projects. I think that standards that start to converge, right now we have 40 plus standard setting bodies. If we can sort of really consolidate that so that the world is very clear what is meant to be the different aspects of quality, and avenues for that to be distributed to, so that the wealth transfer is seamless. And then over time, deepening that liquidity so that the whole financial system can put their weight behind it. Right now, carbon credits are not financeable in itself, or it's very hard for a bank to do so.
Right.
And so all these pieces need to be built. Regulatory clarity on what is the carbon credit, how do you then move corporates to be buying those in a more consistent manner, and the deeper with liquidity, I think that's where we will really see the push to a much bigger impact around that.
So what advice do you give businesses that are considering engaging in the carbon markets?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to learn from.
Right.
The Singapore government, I mean, whether it's EDB has, I think, quite a lot of work and thought around that. But, there are a lot of players like ourselves out there as well that put out a lot of educational pieces, blogs, that's one. And two, there are also quite a growing sustainability talent, consultants, a lot of companies now in-house. And look at what some of the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Googles are doing. Their thought leadership around sustainability and net zero is amazing. So I think there's quite a lot of public white papers out there from them. I think that would be a great place to start. And then there are a lot of local champions as well, like MAS, for example.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of work.
All right, Oi-Yee, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining me from the Singapore FinTech Festival. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.